Blog Talk Radio.
For those that are interested, that was Carrie Joby. You can find her music on YouTube, and she does a lot of covers with a lot of different bands, but she tours with Chris Tomlin. I was actually able to send tickets to my son and his wife, and they were able to attend the concert in, I believe it was Fresno, California. They said it was a wonderful, worshipful, prayerful, church-like vibe and feeling to the overall concert, and that he was praising the Father and the Son in a way that just unified them all in celebration. And what an experience that would be. And so even though I was not able to go myself, I was grateful to be able to share and to send my son and his wife so that they could at least experience what could only be called the ecstasy of that experience. And I'm sure it's going to be, a similar kind of thing when we return to our first estate, and when, because the angels are often singing praises to the Most High. And so that's going to be a wonderful thing when we're all gathered in fellowship and celebration and in unison, in like an angelic choir, just singing praises to the Most High and His Son, and how deserving, and what a wonderful thing and experience that will be. It is August 24th, 2013. It's a 5 p.m. Eastern broadcast. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv, and the topic of today's show is the Disillusioned Saints. Basically, what we're going to be referencing, covering, and speaking about today is the process of awakening and coming to truth, discernment, and revelation on not only the gospel and the glory of the Father and the Son, but also the reality that remains veiled behind what is a thick web of disinformation and disillusion. And so we're going to try to decipher the matrix and help people to understand it a little better, and to speak about what is reality for myself and for many of you that have unlocked yourself from the matrix and have, sought to live life in a different way from what is the normal 9 to 5. And for those people, which is most of the world, that place emphasis on money and materialism, the gathering of wealth, power, prestige. Not saying that, that isn't something that is also part of our daily pursuit in life, but it's certainly not our focus and not our number one priority. Many, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but I feel that a lot of you that listen to our shows and that have come to be part of our listenership and our family, no matter where you are, that when we come together for these shows, that it's like a church, and we're like a family. We're definitely in a Christ-like fellowship with each other, and that for these 90 minutes we are connected in a way that is deeply profound and crosses all borders. And we have the internet to thank for that, the technology of today, and the ability and capacity for us to share in the way that we do, and to embrace the dialogue and the conversation. And so that is truly a blessing, that we are able to encourage one another in such ways and to share with one another in what I say is basically heightened consciousness and conversation, because not a lot of people are able to speak about the things that we do, and we have daily more and more people coming on board as far as their pursuit of truth, in desiring, in seeking, and wanting to know, and that are freeing themselves from the distractions, cutting themselves from what are the vain entertainments of the world and those things that have been established to lead us astray. Because certainly the fallen angels and those that work for them as part of the New World Order, as part of the controlling mechanism, as the overseers of the matrix, they are trying to keep us busy in such way that we never, ever entertain, looking for and seeking out higher purpose for life and being. And so I want to thank all of you for joining us and for being part of the family. I love each and every one of you, and I share a bond with you in a way that deeply moves me, because you have been, each one of you have been confirming witness of the strange journey, the voyage that I have been on since I was really a young child, and yearning to want to know what is truth and trying to make sense of the overall picture, the full summation of everything that you can find, because really truth underlies all things, and once you come to understand it in such way and you have discernment upon it, you can see God and truth, because God is truth, on all levels, from the macrocosm to the microcosm, and that everything in the creation reflects and reverberates that truth. So, anyways, I wanted to speak a little bit about my own awakening, because it's my own experience, and I'm sure each one of you in your own way have in different, because we all walk different paths, but the process of awakening is very, very similar. And for me, what began, making me want to look into things that were other than what was being taught by, the culture, society, civilization, the TV, because the TV is definitely a large teacher and projects data and input into our minds, which sways our opinions and leads us to assert, believe, and accept certain things as reality. And what occurred for me was, the whole event as far as 9/11. And there were things before that, but 9/11 was, especially for those that live in this country, it's one of those things that you can recall exactly where you were, what you were doing, and everything about that moment remains vivid, burned into our memories, into our minds, and into our souls, because it was such an impactful event that it affected all of us, even as a world, as a collective, as humanity, affected us in such ways that, we can all remember the events of that day. And after after that event happened, and none of us, well, not many of us, initially truly understood what was happening and how it was happening. And so many of us were, hopeful that we would embrace, as a world collective, that we would embrace each other in desiring peace and, the restoration of joy and harmony, and to, as a collective, with our intent and with our focus, to bring to justice those who were truly responsible for that event. And so it became something that many of us began to look into in a way that we never had prior. And we began to investigate, began to research, consumed everything that was connected to that event as far as media, magazines, TV shows, movies, anything that was connected to that event in any way. For weeks on end, I watched. I wanted to know. I wanted to learn how something like that could ever take place, and how any human being anywhere could ever plot such evil and to bring such a situation and event to manifestation. It didn't make sense to me, because all of us, many of us at least, believed in the goodness of the world and believed in the goodness of our neighbors and of people everywhere in the world, no matter which country you may be from, that, especially Americans, that we were once a beacon of freedom, and an example, a representation of justice and rule of law and liberty, and the extension of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness for our children and our loved ones and each other. And we wanted those same freedoms and values extended to everybody, everywhere. That we truly believe that our country and our representatives and the government, that even in as far as combating communism, which many of us saw as an evil before we woke up to the matrix and realized that both sides were controlled by the same people, and that the opposition was created in order to pin peoples and countries and ideologies against each other, and to foster war and terrorism and the destruction of lives, the emphasis of depopulation everywhere. And so, we believed in the goodness of our country and of the wars that we were involved in, and military, the destruction of evil, and that we were mostly patriotic. I know I was. And, we were God-fearing, flag-loving, Pledge of Allegiance, believers in the Constitution. And we wanted nothing more than to combat evil wherever we may find it, and to free people from the bondage and oppression of evil in whatever disguises that it took. And 9/11 was a catalyst for us to begin to study and to question, because there were so many anomalies, so many idiosyncrasies connected with that event. And for those that truly were affected, like I was, because I was a columnist for a magazine at the time, and I've been writing since I was 16 years old. I published my first book when I was 22. But anyways, I was a columnist, and I used to write a 2,500-word article for this one magazine every month. And I wrote my article for that month on the events of 9/11. And there's a lot of poems that I broke out from that article that are contained within my second book, When the Evening Dies. But I was affected greatly. The trauma of that event just, I was touched, as most Americans were. And so a lot of us used that energy as a catalyst to and especially since the internet was available to all of us at the time, and there were not as established control mechanisms as there are now, to where people, the government, hackers, different individuals, disinformation trolls, they were able to shut down websites and able to attack people's computers and to make information disappear. Not to say that things like that weren't happening during that time. They certainly were. And many of us learned that as well. And so we tried to preserve the information because we realized that kind of thing was happening. And so many of us began to copy the movies, the television, the newscasts, the interviews, just recording everything and making copies and disseminating that information. It began really what is now the alternative truth movement and the independent free press, according to the citizen representatives of the world. It began a catalyst for civilians to embrace journalism and the dissemination of information, the sharing of it, and the reproduction of it in a way that had never happened prior. And it began, there were so many people that started to post information on their own websites. And soon there were websites out there on the internet that rivaled what were the larger mainstream press news outlets, whether it was television or newspapers, magazines, whatever it was. Even like, for example, the Drudge Report. And so many people now go to and look for information from the Drudge Report. And there are other, a lot of other, many now, alternative news sites where people go to get information on what is not being spoken about, what is not being talked about by the mainstream presses. And now, since since the global population has awakened somewhat and realized that there were several anomalies associated to the events of 9/11. For instance, that we had a representative, William Rodriguez, an eyewitness informant, who saved many people's lives, and he was actually the last person out of the North Tower to make it alive, and he jumped underneath a fire engine, a fire truck that protected him from falling debris. But he was a janitor that worked in the World Trade Center, and he was one of few individuals that had master keys, the skeleton keys for all of the doors, and he was able to go anywhere in the World Trade Centers, at any time. Well, on that particular day, he and his employees, those that worked with him as janitors, as cleaners, wherever, whichever part of the World Trade Center they worked in, they clocked in the basement, in the lower levels of the World Trade Center. And they were witness to bombs going off in the lower level, in the lower part of the World Trade Centers before the plane had ever hit. And so there was someone, somewhere had set charges and placed bombs in the lower parts of those buildings that were set to go off at the same time that the planes or whatever it was that hit the World Trade Centers, that they impacted the North and the South Tower. And these bombs were registered on earthquake machines in different, there were some in different colleges, different places where they recorded the geological movement of the earth. And they registered like an earthquake. And so these were rather large charges. And these charges blew much of what were the lower levels in the basement into oblivion, into powder, into dust. And there were many people that were affected, that were burned, because the flames and the smoke, the incineration from those explosions, they traveled up the elevator shafts. And so many people that were in or near the elevators that were either about to get on or off, they were singed, they were burned. And William Rodriguez helped some of these individuals and got them to ambulances so that they could be helped and rescued. And there were many eyewitness accounts that testified and confirmed his story. You can look it up for yourself. He was truly a hero of that day. He also lowered a ladder down to a couple of guys that were locked in an elevator that was being flooded by the water that was, from the sprinkler system that was gaining and collecting in the elevator shafts, and they were soon to be drowned. And he lowered a long ladder down to these individuals and was able to get them out. Anyways, his story was one of those that went against the official story that was put out by the government and that was backed by the media. And there was another individual that is now, he's no longer with us. He was murdered sometime after testifying and explaining that he was an eyewitness account to explosions occurring in what was World Trade Center 7. And it was a building that was not even hit by an airplane, that went down, that, dropped to dust in 11 seconds in, what I totally believe was a demolition type event. But before it was destructed at 5:28 p.m. on that particular day, Barry Jennings was one of those that worked inside of the building, and he spoke about how he and some firefighters and were trapped in the building, and that they were trying to go to get out, but the stairways and some of the staircases that they were trying to use were completely blown out, and so they had to find alternative methods and ways to get out of the building, which they succeeded in doing. But there was also even the testimony of Rudy Giuliani. He spoke about how he was told by a guy named John, which we never did get his last name, but there was a testimony where he was speaking to Peter Jennings of ABC News, and he spoke about how he was told by this guy named John at the Office of Emergency Management that the building was going to go down, that it was going to be blown. And Larry Silverstein also spoke about this and gave testimony as to how he was told that the buildings were going to be cooled, meaning that, this is demolition terminology for the implosion and the destruction of a building. And when you think about these things, considering that World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7, all three of them were destroyed in what was about 11 seconds, you're speaking about 120-story, two buildings that were 120 stories being destroyed and falling basically into their own imprint in 11 seconds flat. And that even though only two buildings on that day were hit supposedly by these planes, 3 buildings went down on that day. And so that was another anomaly that begged people to bring answers to, begged people to investigate, and many did. And these were just some of the anomalies. The fact that a guy named Jamie from Fox News, I believe it was, reported that when the Pentagon was hit, that there were no plane parts, no fuselage, no engines, no tail section, nothing of the sort found outside of the Pentagon or inside or either on the lawn. And, the official stories stated that, one of the Boeing huge jet airliners struck the eastern side of the Pentagon, which just happened to be reinforced over the past few weeks for just such an event. And that all, they reported that all of the passengers that were on board that particular plane, that their DNA was found and confirmed when there was no baggage, no luggage, no, when you look at a plane that hits the ground and then hits a building, there's a massive debris field. And there was none of that also found at the Pentagon. And so we realized, those that began to do research and all of these anomalies and idiosyncrasies started to all come together. It says in the Word, in the Bible, I believe it's Matthew chapter 6, that out of the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses shall the truth be established. And so here we had multiple, hundreds, possibly even thousands of confirming witnesses that what was being told to us by the government, the media, the press, that it was hogwash. It was, for whatever reason, it was a story that could not be trusted. It was propaganda that was leading us and steering us away from what was the truth of what occurred that day. And then our government and the Congress, the president, they pushed for war. And what was very strange about all of that was that they had already in place a massive arsenal of equipment for which to begin the bombardment of Afghanistan and then later Iraq. That somehow all of that had been sent months prior to be ready for this exact moment and day. And so they began the bombardment of Afghanistan, blaming Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda for the terrorist events of that day. And the official story said that 15 hijackers, under the authority of Osama bin Laden, who was conducting and synchronizing these terrorist events from a cave in Afghanistan, that they were somehow able to trick and to hijack all these multiple jetliners and to attack America in such a way that they were able to fly these extremely sophisticated planes into three of the most iconic buildings and landmarks of American freedom, and even to impact the Pentagon, which is supposed to be one of the most protected buildings in the entire world. And so somehow we were supposed to believe that. And then we had reports that the reason that air traffic controllers couldn't make sense of what was going on is because they were actually running drills in which terrorists had hijacked airliners and had planned to run them into buildings. And so we were supposed to, believe that it was just coincidence that the military was running these drills at the exact same time that the terrorists, supposed terrorists, had succeeded in pulling off such a major event. And all of this, has been reported on. Everything that I'm telling you, you can find in the public domain. I'm not making up any of these things, and I'm just telling you some of it. There's so much, and I'm sure many of you, have done your own research and investigation into these things, and that, the same thing, that 9/11 was a catalyst for you to awaken from your slumber and to begin to question government, the media, our representatives, the military, and the emphasis on war. Because here's another thing, and I'm going to open the phone lines too, because I want you to be able to tell me, about your own research, about your own awakening. And for those that want to call in, the call-in number is 646-929-0937, and I'm going to take your calls in just a few minutes. So if you would like to call in and share your opinion or your research or just make a comment about the things that I've been talking about, I would really appreciate that, and I'm sure that the listeners would as well. But before I forget, I want to bring up one other point here. First, it was reported that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which was put into place to supposedly handle such events as this, they were flown to New York on September 10th, one day prior to the events. And somehow they were in place and ready when these events went down. And so that's another, strange anomaly. How could the government somehow know that, such events were going to go down? And if they did know, why didn't they warn the people? Why didn't they warn the mayor of New York City, even though we know he was part of allowing all this to happen, and that he covered up the events by getting rid of all the evidence? Immediately after the attacks, they began to dismantle all the evidence and to get rid of it and to ship it out to China or wherever it was that they sold all the scrap to. That he was part of the problem. He even said in that interview with Peter Jennings that he was told by this John at the Office of Emergency Management that the buildings were going to fall, and yet he and his buddies, they were able to get out because he was at that time in World Trade Center 7, and he was able to he managed to get him and his friends out and talked about in that interview about how he was able to get out, but yet he didn't relay this same information to the firefighters, the police officers, the emergency workers that were in the process of trying to, fight the fires and save people's lives that were going into the buildings. He didn't share that information with them. And, so many emergency workers were in those buildings when they went down, which if you haven't ever, studied or learned another strange anomaly, that never in the history of fire anywhere in the world has a steel structured, concrete reinforced building ever went down because of fire. And certainly not in 11 seconds. And so these are some of the questions, some of the things that bothered me about the events of that day and about the official story and what we were being told. And so I wanted to know more. And so I began to do my research, and then I found out, that there were a lot of conspiracies, and that was back a long way. Even, the bombings of the Oklahoma City, where many children died in those events. Anomalies connected to that. There were other, what are now termed as false flag events that were either allowed to happen, that shortly afterwards they increased the budgets for, departments like Homeland Security or, for the military or for law enforcement, SWAT teams, whatever it was. After one of these type of events, the budget for such military, police, civilian police forces were often doubled or tripled in size. And that I learned also that World War II, it goes back to that even further. When you do your research, it goes back a long way. The elites of the world, those that are connected to the New World Order, what we now know and call the New World Order, they have been utilizing these same techniques over and over and over to create chaos and to fund war, and that they often arm both sides of the conflict. Even communism. Communism was a creation of the global elite. And look at how many wars and how much destruction and how much chaos is tied and connected to the opposition of capitalism and communism. Vietnam, all those different wars, Korea, we still have Korea split into North and South Korea. All the wars in Central and South America, that were supposedly based on fighting and combating the expansion and rise of communism. I mean, it goes back so far, and the rabbit hole goes very, very deep. Let me see if there's anybody that wanted to make a comment here. Area code 406. Did you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share?
Yes, and thank you for having me, Brother Zen. I love you dearly in Yahushua's name, and I'm so glad that you have all the listeners that you do. I just wanted to make a quick comment. This is Yolette, by the way. I just wanted to make a quick comment. Thank you, brother. It's good that you're opening up the lines. You said something today that really touched me in my awakening, and it has to do with this war propaganda that you're speaking of. While I was in the Navy, I served in the United States Navy for 8 years, and I was on board Trident submarines, the ballistic missile subs, and my specific job title was missile technician. And I don't want to go too in depth of it, just for security reasons over the phone, but I was responsible for targeting warheads. And so I was opened to a lot of confidential information that just really did not sit well with me. I knew that things were not right within the government, and all the branches of the military, they hoist a flag, and it's a flag of liberty, they call it, and it has a serpent on it. And underneath that serpent on this flag, it says, "Don't tread on me." And I always used to wonder, who is that me? Who is that? And towards the end of my military career, right before I got out of the Navy, I used to go home to my mother's house in the mountains of Montana, and she would try to get me to read this document called the Synagogue of Satan. And I had a very high clearance from the military, and she would give me some pointers on that document. And I would tell her, "Mom, that's nonsense. I would know about it," even though I knew that our government was up to something that was embedded in history. And I'm talking like the history of humanity, going all the way back to Cain himself, to Lucifer himself. I just didn't know it went that deep. And so anyway, she kept trying to get me to read this document called the Synagogue of Satan. And I would tell her that's hogwash. I would know about that stuff, Mom. You shouldn't hear about what I do know about, And so, but then when I was at Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company after the Navy, a man prayed for me over the phone. The Holy Spirit came over me. It was a crazy experience. He told me to go to the mountains of Montana, work and learn. And as soon as I did, through my research, I stumbled across Luke 10:19, where our Lord and Savior Yahushuah says, "Behold, I give you power to tread on serpents." And then that flag came to my mind where it says, "Don't tread on me." And I realized right then and there who me was, being the God of this world and the bloodlines that have been ruling this world for the history of our course in this earth age. And I don't want to take up too much of your time, Zen, but thank you for having me. But
I think this is important, so feel free to elaborate.
Well, it just goes to show you that our war is not with flesh and blood. It is with principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places. And Lucifer himself boasts a flag that, like you said, we were all God-fearing, flag-waving Christians. And, but the gospel, the truth of Yahushuah was hid from us because our minds are blinded by the God of this world. And, it's crazy how deep that goes. My brothers in the military, they raise this flag with a serpent on it and says, "Don't tread on me." And Yahushua says, "I give you power to tread on serpents." And that just goes to show who our military is serving, the agenda that they are fulfilling, this one world system coming to order, and the fact that this is a spiritual battle being manifested in the flesh. And I just wanted to share that point. Again, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I love you dearly, brother, and I love all our fellow brethren and sisters in Yahushua's name. And thank you for having me, Zen.
Oh, hey, brother, before you go, let me ask you this, because I think this is important, because, when that event happened, so many young people joined the military and joined the ranks of the different branches of service because they wanted to, they wanted to get revenge for our country and to set things right, and so many young souls joined the military at that time. First, were you one of them? Is that what encouraged you to join the military? And then also, how did you feel after you had learned the truth? Because so many people, especially those that went and served in Iraq, when Iraq had nothing to do with the events of that day, even, the official story, they had nothing to do with those terrorists, the supposed 15 terrorists that struck out and, orchestrated those events, even though we know that that truth is a huge lie, and that there were, explosive devices that had to have been implanted into those buildings long before those planes ever even took off that day. So can you answer those two questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually already attached to the submarine that I was stationed on. It was USS BN 727, the USS Michigan, and we were in a setting, an overhaul setting. It was a temporary maintenance period called refit, which is kind of a big deal. What they do is they pull the submarine into a big dock, so to speak, and then they let all the water drain out of this dock, and then the submarine rests on tanks. That way they can, and these giant concrete blocks, that way they can do maintenance on the outer part of the hull. And we were not scheduled to go back out to sea to cover target packages for like another month and a half. And I had just gotten on board the boat like maybe a week before that. I graduated from my schooling a week beforehand, and so I was a very new member of the ship. I do remember that day very well because our alarm status went up extremely high right away, and they had us pull right out of dry dock right away, and we were to go out and cover target packages. And most of the military, if not all of them, except for those maybe at the Pentagon and some of which that may be stationed throughout the country. Denver, I know, is kind of a big hub for officers that are aware of some of this information that are strictly prohibited not to speak of anything like this. But no, that didn't motivate me to join because I had already joined. But I remember how many people did join after that. And to answer the question on how I felt, especially when I came to my awakening, there was something always really upset within my spirit that I could feel, and so I was kind of a bit of a rebel the entire time I was in the military. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I got in trouble, like big trouble one time, because we were sitting in a targeting brief, and you got a couple, 2-star admirals in there, captains, commanders, high-ranking officers, and then a few blue shirts, and I was one of them. And we're talking about these targets, and I knew about the corruption. We all kind of know about it. You just deal with it and put it off and whatnot. But I remember making a comment. I raised my hand, and the targeting officer pointed me out. And I said, you know who we need to be targeting? And they all looked back at me, and I said, President Bush. And they said, you're lucky you don't lose your license over this. And I took a lot of heat for that. But that was just kind of my approach. I had a lot of anger over what was going on through those years because I knew it wasn't right. I just couldn't put my thumb on it exactly. And when I was at Lockheed Martin and the Holy Spirit came over me and he told me to go to the mountains and work and learn, that is what started my research. That is when I started waking up to the truth of the synagogue of Satan, the serpents and their reign here on earth and all the kingdoms, the bloodline of Cain, the fallen angels and their presence in all of it, and their mix in all of it, and their influence. I mean, just all of it. And, it kind of like what you've said throughout your shows, you kind of reach a state of panic almost, like, my goodness, everybody needs to know about this. But then the more you start talking about it, like, people think you're just absolutely nuts. And, like, my friends, when I was in the military, they'd ask me, tell us the good stuff, what's classified. And you tell them, like, the broad and basic things that everybody knows, even though it's classified info. But then you start getting in the nitty-gritty, and they call you nuts. They call you insane. They tell you belong in a ward. And so I really had to learn about who I was speaking to and whether it would actually do them harm or good. But it was a very profound experience for me, and that's actually when I found you as well. It's about 3.5 years ago, right at the beginning of my search, the Father led me to you. So I'm just really grateful for your ministry and the information you put out and the work that you do, and all our brothers and sisters that are here with us and helping us be watchmen and just spread the truth of the light of Yahushuah.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. I really do, and I send my love to you and family, and I want to thank you for your service to our country and to all the military individuals and people out there that believed in our country and that wanted to, fight for our freedoms and our values and to represent that to the world. We were all duped, we were all duped. And so now that we understand, we try to share, and that's a really awesome thing to try to share with others. So
Amen.
I appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Zen. Likewise. And I'm going to go ahead and hang up the phone now and continue listening, brother.
All right. God bless you, brother.
All right. God bless you. Bye-bye.
All right. I want to bring up a couple, and then I'm going to take area code 505. I'm going to bring them on in just a second. But I wanted to make a commentary before I forget here. Cookie had said in the chat room that, let me read it precisely, that they also use 9/11 to increase the strength of the Patriot Act and to take away more of our rights. And this is so absolutely true, and this is an integral, a massive part of the agenda of the elite and the New World Order for the events of that day. That the Patriot Act, which, was passed without ever even being written, that the representatives, the Senate, those that were not on board with the New World Order, that they were terrorized in such a way and subjected to humiliation that all of them, or most of them, signed off without ever investigating or looking into or realizing what it was that they were about to pass into law. And the Patriot Act, we know, had to have been written months in advance, and that the Patriot Act gave the police, the military, powers that trumped the Constitution and basically shredded our rights and our freedoms. Before the events of 9/11 and the passing of the Patriot Act, we were basically a country where you were innocent until proven guilty. But after the events of that day, we basically became a country of where you were guilty until proven innocent. And these are things that the global elite had been trying to establish and to put into law in our country for a very long time, because much of the citizenry were very loud and vocal supporters of every amendment of the Constitution and valued our freedoms, valued our rights. And these are things which we wanted to extend to the entire world. We wanted everybody to be free and to have the chance to live, pursue happiness, life, liberty, joy, all those things. We wanted everybody, everywhere, to be extended the same rights and freedoms. And we believed that our military, our country, under our flag, that they were fighting wars to do just such a thing. But they struck hard here after that event, and they were able to put into law the Patriot Act, which still, even now, trumps the Constitution, and that gave them the right to dismantle, to sabotage, and to step all over the rights and freedoms that our forefathers had given to us to prevent tyranny and a tyrannical type government and a structure of government that could impose its will on the individual rights of each one of us as God-fearing, God-loving, and God-given citizens with certain inalienable rights. All that was decimated, and it's a sad thing. Because all that was, they said it was only going to be temporary, but now it's all pretty much law. So let me go ahead and bring on 505. Area code 505. Did you have a question or comment?
Oh, hi, Zen. This is Kathy in Albuquerque.
Hey,
I was
Kathy,
really just
how
listening.
Are you doing, sister?
I'm fine. I'm very fine. I'm glad to talk to you. It's nice to hear your voice. I'm enjoying listening to the show.
I was just going to say, can you just tell us what you think about the things that I've said since you called in?
I'm just enthralled in all of it. I actually listened to your podcast with Reality. What is it, the Reality Tracker?
Yeah, with the
last night.
hijacker.
I tell you what, I've been crying all day. I've known all this stuff for a long time, but sometimes it hits you real hard, right? Like,
right.
But then it's still like, damn, like really, I know this is all true, but it's just overwhelming. And I would love to share my awakening, but I get it all so muddled. All that you're talking about now with 9/11, I was there. I remember the day. I know all the questions and the wondering what is going on, and I think, I'm just realizing how right you are in that. My awakening probably started a lot sooner than I realized, when those things were happening. But I really woke up in the summer of 2009, and it was very scary for me because my third eye opened, I believe. I started seeing things with my own eyes in the sky, taking a gazillion pictures of the clouds and looking up stuff, just researching on the Internet. And then I started, at some point, to make a connection and started looking up everything. I was looking up, trying to find a correlation in the Bible. And I know I'm not making much sense right now, but everything just really slammed me. I almost lost my mind. I really did. I couldn't walk and talk because I was so overwhelmed with information that was just coming to me. I didn't know you or John Baptist or any of these people then. I didn't have anybody to listen to or talk to. It was just happening to me by myself, and all my friends and my family thought I had gone crazy, and they were telling me, you need to shut up, they're going to lock you up. Somebody's going to lock you up. Nobody would listen.
Yeah.
It was a lonely, lonely place to be.
Right. And, that's similar. And I think you did fine, sister. And, our stories are similar. And in that all of us, when we first found out about these different things, we wanted more than anything to be able to share these things with our loved ones and for it to be important to them, to at least important enough that we could, share a conversation and have dialogue over these things that were just profoundly, deeply important to us, and why it was that it wasn't for them just didn't make sense, and because I also kind of, all my friends and family members during that time, they all thought I was nuts and didn't understand why I was looking into these things and researching these things, and I just wanted to shake them, to say, why can't you understand these things are important? They're so relevant for us.
Right,
as
or
a
even
world.
if they would entertain and do some digging of their own, but they would just be like, no,
right.
You're kidding. Now, I remember I went through a very big, great loss through all of this, and I think a lot of us have experienced that as well. I think that's a common denominator. Not everybody, but a lot of us. I lost everything I had financially. I ended up having to move out of state near family to get support, and I'm starting over. I'm in my 50s, and that was a hard road to hoe, but it was part of all of this journey that I am on. And I realize that now, and I'm embracing it rather than feeling sorry for myself. I'm realizing it all had to happen for me to continue to grow and to learn. And had I stayed where I was at, this all wouldn't have happened probably. And I forgot, I got lost in my thought there. Oh, it was when I live in Albuquerque now. I lived in Texas, and that's when I found when I moved here. I kept searching online. Things weren't so available in 2009 as they are now. It just increased and increased so rapidly. And that's when I found John Baptist. And he conversed with me over email, and he was such a comfort for me. If he's listening, I love him so much. And but even then, he did not I'd already made the connection with the demons and the aliens. And nobody was on that page with me yet. And I was like, I started to think maybe I was crazy, but I already knew I can see them. And it's very bizarre. They don't really scare me but I can see them. And it blows my mind.
I think a lot of people are now being able to do those. It's like the worlds are overlapping,
Right.
Yeah, let me get you just comment on this, since I have you. Another thing that a lot of us lost was just our innocence, in that we believed in the government, we believed in our representatives, we believed that we had a choice in elections and that we were able to elect our own representatives and that the government truly was representative of the people and that we could trust our doctors and trust those that we held as authority figures. And, all of that was decimated. We learned about the vaccines. We learned that all of the presidents are basically blood related and from the same family line. So all those things which, our innocence and our patriotism, all those things were lost as well. And so, our whole foundational belief system, everything that we held as sacred and that we believed in and loved as being Americans, all that was decimated, and I think for a lot of people that is too much, and that's what prevents them from going there, to looking into these things. But
sure, that's a harsh truth to swallow. It's hard to believe. Even sometimes I doubt. We still do sometimes, I think, just go, oh, gosh, this can't be true. You don't want to believe such a thing. My father, listening to the young man that was talking earlier, it really touched me because my father was a colonel in the Air Force. My father flew a fighter jet, and he was, quite a big deal in the Air Force, if you will. And he's been dead since 91, and I started looking up stuff on him. I so wish he were here because I know he knew things. I know he did. We asked him when we were children, this is years ago, and I'd forgotten about this. Are there such a thing as aliens, Dad? And he said, I am not at liberty to discuss that with you. He didn't say no. That was his answer. I am not at liberty to discuss that with you. And he flew covert missions when he was in Vietnam. He might have been in Peru. He was all over the place. There were all these other things going on that I never even entertained as a child. I've done a lot of digging into that too, where my dad was, what his role was. And he was actually, after he retired, he was an advisor to the Iranian Air Force. And I've thought about that in my adult years. Like, my gosh, my dad was over there teaching them what they know. We were helping them. you know, and my father was a good man. You know, he was. He was a patriot, and
Right.
he excelled at what he did, but I wonder how he felt about it. You know, like, what did he know? What was really going on? It's mind-boggling.
Right. It really is, and the rabbit hole goes so deep, you know, and for those that don't know, and as far as the fallen angels, they are the ancient aliens. They are the ones that are connected to what is the delusion, and that is a whole other thing that, you know, has to be people have to come to terms with.
It has to come to light. I was crying today. It was from listening to you last night, and I know I've listened to you so much, and I bought those books from you for my son to give to his professors. He is so
awesome.
I'm so grateful for you, because you're just touching all of us and helping us all put all this together, which is so important, because we are scattered. It's hard. You know, we don't all have the mindset that you do. I wish I did. I'd write a book, but I can't. I can't put it all together. But in any case, I was listening. I was thinking what you said in that recording when you said we have been robbed, and I've been crying all day because I am so mad.
Yes,
you know, it's just such an injustice, and I know that this all had to happen, and we are going to be with Jesus, and we are going to be with God, and I'm just so grateful to be awake. Just so grateful to be awake.
Yes, me too, sister. I appreciate your testimony, and please do call in again sometime. I think your feedback was vital, and I appreciate you, and let me know how the book affects your son.
I will. He hasn't had the opportunity to give those books yet, but he will. He's hopefully he'll be starting school tomorrow. So that's another. Keep him in your prayers, please. He's waiting on the financing because he's getting, financial aid, and so he's been really concerned. Last time I talked to him, the check hadn't come yet, so he couldn't enroll for school Monday. But he is so excited, and he's 30 years old, and he's been through so much in his young life, but he's turning it all around and wants to become an engineer and do what he can while we're here to make a difference in the world and use his talent.
Right. Awesome. Well, at least you're helping them to wake up. So, thank you, sister.
You.
God bless you.
Okay. Love you. Thank you, Zen. Bye-bye.
Love you, too. Bye-bye. All right, we're going to go to area code 859. Area code 859, did you have a question or comment?
Hey, Zen, I was just listening in, brother.
Okay, we appreciate you, brother.
All right, God bless.
God bless you. All right, let's take this other call, and then we'll finish up the show. Area code 978, did you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share?
Hi, Zen. It's Nancy up in Boston. No, just listening in. My only option is my cell. I think I must hit buttons, not realizing it.
Okay, no problem at all, sister. We appreciate you. Thank you for supporting us as well. I send my love.
Okay, thanks.
All right, bye-bye. All right, so, yes, we have been robbed. And everything that we held as sacred, held as special, has been stolen from us. And so when we came to the knowledge of the New World Order in whatever ways so many of us have, so many of you are awake, and I'm grateful. You know, I don't want to be asleep and still believing all those lies and all the propaganda and being deceived and led astray in so many of the ways that I was. Even though awakening to the reality is so mind-blowing that we have to really unlearn everything that we ever knew and try to pick up what pieces of the puzzles we can that are still, have any truth to them, and to try to put together a reality that we can, still live in and still survive in and still hold together for having purpose and giving us a reason to awake each day and to be joyful and grateful and hopeful for another new awakening and another new chance and opportunity to do whatever it is that we can during the course of that day. Because when we learn these things and just the tremendous amount, the tremendous weight and pressure of this knowledge, of the responsibility of knowing these things, it's so great that we can't live in the matrix anymore. We can't just go on and act like everything's okay, and we can't act like the government's going to take care of us, and that we can trust the doctors, and that it's okay to get the vaccines, and that it's okay to use the cell phones for all the time that we do, and that they're not going to harm us in any way, and that we can trust the food and the water that we drink, the drinks that we... I mean, when you awaken up to the New World Order and its broad expanse and its incredible reach, you have to be wary of all things. You have to be knowledgeable of everything. And you have to then begin to study and learn about everything, because the conspiracy is so deep and so broad that it incorporates everything. And that's a great responsibility. It takes so much time, so much effort, and for many of us, it ostracizes you to your friends, your family, your loved ones, even to acquaintances that you'll meet on the bus or in school or at your job, that want to talk about things that to you just are nonsensical and meaningless, that people are so asleep and so locked in to the matrix and dedicated to it that they don't even understand and can't see the bigger picture of where the world is headed and what is on the horizon and what's coming down the line. That responsibility is a tremendous burden, it's a tremendous blessing, and it's a tremendous curse. And for those that have awakened, when you have new eyes, new ears, and a new mind to understand, and when you are, touched by the Holy Spirit to know about all these things, you can't be led astray. The truth can't be hidden from you. You see through the propaganda of every newscast and all the things that all the different shows are trying to push as reinforcement for the matrix. All that is just meaningless propaganda. And the way that most of the world lives, the way that they prioritize their lives and the energy that they spend dedicating it to certain focuses and all those things that to us are no longer relevant, no longer important, and no longer worthy of our time and effort. It's so difficult to have a foot in both worlds. But the incredible thing for each one of us is that in the awakening process, and I hope and I pray this for each of you, no matter if you have awakened to the New World Order, I pray that you have come to remembrance of self, that you know why you're here, who you are, and what this life is all about. And in knowing those things that you have come to know your Creator, and that you know that the Creator has a Son, and that His Son came into the flesh, wore the flesh as an armor of soul, in order that He could be murdered, brutalized, mistreated, spit upon, harassed, coerced, all for us. The Father so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son to die on the cross in order to bring us redemption and repentance and salvation and a chance to our return to our first estate. That it's important for you that if you have began the process of awakening, that you go that step further, that you seek out to know the truth of the gospel, because the Father and the Son, the apostles, the patriarchs, the matriarchs of old that have given their lives to bring this truth to us and to provide it in scriptural form in what is the Old and the New Testament, in the Bible and the extra biblical canonical books which support the teachings and the foundations of that truth. It is prophecy. It is commandment and dictation for a way of life. It is salvation. It is our chance to serve the Creator that created all things and to be in alignment with their will for our lives, that if we follow the commandments and serve them, and in our awakening embrace being the watchman and the foot washer, to sound the trumpet, to awaken as many of your fellow brothers and sisters as you can before we reach that precipice, that time when there is no return. When we reach that point where if you are a foolish virgin and you do not have your oil ready, that you are not prepared for the destruction of Jerusalem, as Jeremiah so forewarned and warned about and sounded the alarm on in his day, that Jerusalem is Mystery Babylon of our day, America and the Western nations and the world, that it has been plotted by the New World Order and the powers that be, that the world will be pushed into a conflagration, that there would be peace but come sudden destruction, that if you're not ready for that, that you'll be caught like the foolish virgins, without oil in your lamp, without your wicks trimmed, that you won't be prepared for the return of the bridegroom that is coming to restore all things to order and to harmony, and to put the fallen angels and those that serve them, the ruling elite of the world, the hybrid bloodline that serves them, that worships their father, Lucifer, Satan, the adversary, as God, that leads the world astray into worshiping the idols, the fallen angels as their, as the gods, as the benefactors, as the ancient aliens, as the creators of humanity, that strong delusion is being put into place and being emphasized around the world, and that so many cultures of the world still worship a pantheon of gods. And so many people being led away and astray from the prosperity gospel of the mainstream churches and the emphasis on, whatever it is that they teach and emphasize that leads people to abandon Christianity and to seek truth elsewhere, whether it's in Buddha or Hinduism or the worship of the feathered serpent or the aliens, the Sumerian gods, the pagan deities of the world, because so many of them they are worshiping these entities still, even today. They don't know about the strong delusion. And it says that even the most elect would be deceived if it were possible. So, and I consider you, all of you that have found this show, that know about these things, that have come to relationship with the Father and the Son, that are serving them, that have the kingdom as priority for your lives. I consider you as the wise virgins, as the most elect, as those that are of the righteous, that will be found worthy. So, don't be the foolish virgin. And remember, there was once a time when in our first estate we may not have made those choices which supported the Father and the Son and the Morning Star administration, that there were many that rode the fence during that time that were of the Laodicean church of that world age, and that many are in embodiment and incarnation in this lifetime for just such choice. Not everybody, because there are the elect and there are those that are the fallen ones that worship the fallen forces, that worship the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness of this world, that are of the Canaanite line, that support the seed of the serpent. But those of you that are of the seed of the woman, and it doesn't matter now whether you're seed of the serpent or seed of the woman, Christ died on the cross to give us all chance for redemption, for repentance, for grace. He has given us the promise and extended chance and opportunity to each one of us. Don't be caught on the fence. You cannot be lukewarm in this lifetime. You have to make a choice. Those that are lukewarm, those that are on the fence and that are enjoying the comforts of this world, if everything is A-okay and hunky-dory, and that that you're too wealthy or you're too comfortable in your wealth and your pleasures, and that there's no judgment coming for you, you're going to be spewed out. And we've arrived to the end of the show. I apologize for those that have called in and that want to make commentary. We only have 90 seconds, and so I just want to pray for each one of you, all of you out there, and tell you that I love you and I want you to be home with the rest of us. I want all of us to see it, visualize it, embrace it. The Father and the Son want you there as well. He has gone forward to prepare a place for us. Be counted worthy. Be of the elect. Walk the narrow way. In Yahushuah's name. God bless all. Good night. God bless y'all. Good night.